Welcome to this episode of Equalizer. Today's guest is Mr. John Alite. He brings a perspective forged in one of the most violent corners of organized crime and reshaped through years of accountability, testimony, and public engagement. Once a fierce street enforcer and trusted associate of the Gambino crime family in New York, he operated in the shadows of the Gotti era, collecting debts, directing violence, and moving in circles most people only see in headlines and movies. After a prison term and cooperation with federal authorities, he transitioned into public sphere as an author, speaker, and now a city councilman in New Jersey, using the lessons of his past to warn others about the reality, not the glamour, of the life, and to engage directly in community and civic leadership. In this conversation, we will explore his rise inside the Gambino network, the cause of the world of victims and families, his decision to testify, and how that experience informs both his books and his current work in public service. Hi, John. Welcome to the Equalizer podcast. I really appreciate you being with me today. Tell us a little bit about who John Alite is or was at one time. I know you grew up in Woodhaven Boulevard, in Queens, near Ozone Park, near Howard Beach, all that area. And you were a really good baseball player. Your name still precedes you for that. Tell us a little bit about you.
My father was a sports fanatic. So there was two things that he did. One was he brought me around the mafia world since I'm a kid. Him and my uncle were partners with a guy named Charlie Luciano, Blackie Luciano. That was Lucky Luciano's first cousin. So they grew up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So he introduced me to mafia guys since I'm a kid. Baby 3-4 years old, and he also was a sports fanatic. So those two worlds he brought me into, and baseball player and a boxer. As baseball, I loved it. Boxing, I loved it. So I grew up, like a real rough little kid, because of my upbringing.
Yeah, your father was also a rough cookie. He was not somebody that people mess with.
He was very good with his hands. He was friendly with Muhammad Ali. He met him years before Muhammad Ali was famous. My dad was a Navy boxer. He grew up in the same neighborhood as Vito Genovese, so he knew all these guys as a kid. He wasn't a shooter or anything like that, but just a gambler, a scrapper, a fighter. He was well liked because he hung around, gambling dens. He was around. All his friends were bookmakers and street guys. They come from Albania, was communism. So.
How would you describe the Queens of your childhood beyond the unusual tough neighborhood?
They say that again. How would I describe what?
How would you describe the neighborhood when you were growing up in that part of town? Because you had a lot of rough guys in that neighborhood. People think Queens, doesn't have tough guys, but out of those neighborhoods, a lot of tough kids came out of those neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, outside of the mob world, people's always talking about the mafia to me, but I grew up around the leader of the Crazy Homicides. That was a Spanish group. Ringo was the boss of that group. He went out with a girl, Anne Marie. I went out with the sister as a baby. So I had the introduction to the Latin community as a kid through him in Brooklyn, in Highland Park. Back then, it was, the Black Panthers. It was groups like that, 7 and 9. So outside of the mob world, because everybody's always talking about the mob world, I just happened to grow up knowing a lot of street guys, which, in the street world, for people that don't know, it's not about just being tough. It's about being lucky if you're going to survive. And it's about relationships. And because of my dad knowing so many people, I had a lot of relationships in the street, from the parents of the friends of my father to their older sons to myself, to the mixture of our neighborhood, Frank K. Lane and the area I grew up with. that area was a lot of Spanish. Further down was some black. In South Jamaica, it was black. I knew a lot of the guys from down there. And in our neighborhood, it was mixed, Woodhaven. If you go down Ozone Park and Howard Beach, it was more Italian. So, we got a full view of, the American, ethnic mix. And, I just kind of fit in because, like I said, my father knew everybody, and which made me know the Pagans motorcycle gang. The Spencer's father, Mo, was second in command of the Pagans back then. So, I just knew everybody. And, I grew up in a streety area.
What were the first signs looking back that you were headed towards a criminal path rather than a conventional life? Because you even got a scholarship. I mean, you were not a bad student either. And you were a good sports person.
I just, without realizing it myself, even when I went to work at a deli, it was all gangsters using the back room payphone. And it was my girlfriend's uncle that was the local wise guy bookmaker with the Lucchese family. It was around me everywhere. And whether I liked it or not, I was part of it. And, through friends, through family, through girlfriends, through, and I loved that world. I can't say I didn't. As a kid, I loved playing sports. I wasn't a dummy in school, but I really hated school. And being an athlete, I became the captain of the baseball team. I played varsity all 4 years, but I became captain in junior and senior year. And I just kept moving myself towards the criminal element. I liked it. I liked the adrenaline. I liked, when you're at that age, you only see the good parts of things. You don't see the shitty parts of the betrayal and that stuff. That comes later on. When you get a little older, you understand the nonsense of the street and how it's really not about loyalty. It's only about power, money, backstabbing, and I don't have any good words really for the street world.
How did your Albanian immigrant background affect how Italian crews view you in the street and in business?
In the street world, obviously it's like anything else. It's like jail. Everything's by race and what area you're from. So if you're from New York, the New York guys stay together. If you're Spanish, you stay with the white guys. If you're black, you stay with the black guys. If you're from Philadelphia, you stay with the black guys from Philly. And it was the same thing growing up. I think, being Albanian, I was always the outsider. And being the outsider, I was always the more aggressive. Because the more aggressive I was, the more they needed me. And it also, I had the drive for money. I came from a poor family, so I wanted money. And the way to get it was be a little smarter than the next guy and be a little tougher. So whether I liked it or not, that's where my aim was to be.
What did your parents want for you, and when did you realize your vision for yourself collided with theirs?
My father always wanted me to be a pro athlete. He didn't care about school too much. He just grew up, like I said, left Albania. He left a country that was communism, suppression, oppression. He dropped out of school, I believe, in the 3rd grade. So my father just thought the fast way to success was to become a pro fighter or a baseball player or something athletic. That was his dream for me. My mom was a little more where she wanted me to get into the workforce. They didn't talk about college, my parents, much. They didn't say much about, they just talked about, my mom was go to work, and my father was, work out, practice, run, get down in the gym every day. He wanted us in the basement. We had a gym to box and jump rope. He wanted me to do road work every day. And most parents would come home and say, did your homework? He would say, did you do your 200 push-ups? Did you run today? How much did you run? Did you throw the ball against the wall? Did you take any swings? Did you go to the cage? These are the questions he asked me.
Who were your first real street influence that made crime look attractive or inevitable to you?
I would say, guys like Blackie Luciano, because he was a really hell of a nice guy. He wasn't a big mouth. He was pretty quiet. He was successful. He treated me like, when you're a kid, they treat you, they're throwing you up in the air. They're joking with you about hand wrestling. They're buying you ice cream. They're smoking cigars and telling you, take a puff. They're drinking a little whiskey. They're giving you shots. So, you like it. You feel like you're one of the boys. They pat you on the head, tell you do a pull-up, do a push-up. And I think Blackie was one of the big influences for sure as a baby.
How did the local police presence and tactics in Queens shape your early attitude towards law enforcement?
Like most street kids, we didn't like them. You talked about hating them for no reason. You're brainwashed as a kid. F the police. I was fighting with them a lot. I caught some bad beatings by one bad beating from 106 precinct. That was the stun gun precinct, and it was a precinct where they stuck a baton up a black kid's ass, and so they were known to be a very corrupt precinct. And I caught a real bad beating on Cross Bay Boulevard from them once. I got a bad beating in Nassau County another time. They knew me, so the problem is, and I don't blame the police. I'm not like this new generation. I think they're soft. As soon as they get beat up, they're screaming and crying and suing. And well, you wanted to be a gangster, that's part of it. So in our generation, we expected to get beat up by the cops. When you had a big mouth, even when my dad was a street guy, but if I got beat up by a cop and he came to the house, my father would beat me up too. He didn't say, "Oh, let's sue the cop. The cop's wrong." We had a different generation. We had a respect for him, even though we didn't like him. We had a respect for him. These kids now, they just don't get their head handed to them. And when they do, they're crying. So I don't got too much respect for a lot of young generation of street guys.
What was the first serious crime you committed where you felt there is no going back now? And I allege is the first homicide. I mean, it changes the person.
Two situations. One, when I was a driver of Jamaicans that robbed a guy that was friends with me, lived around the corner, and I took a ride with him. I was the driver of that hit. And the other one was I killed a biker. I baseball batted 3 bikers. I was home sleeping, and they threatened a good friend of mine who wasn't a gangster, just a regular guy. He actually was going to school to be an accountant. Him and another friend of mine was at a local bar that I ran drugs out of. They called me up. They were locked inside the bar. It was a gated bar, so they locked it. It had a double door of wood because of all the trouble there. So you had to get buzzed in. They called me up. I showed up with a baseball bat. I only lived a couple of blocks away. And I batted the 3 guys, killing one of them. He went into coma. Obviously, he didn't wake up. And I think once I did those things, and that really wasn't mob related, the shooting with the Jamaicans was, but those 2 incidences were the first where I was involved in murders, and there was no turning back from that.
Were there teachers, coaches, or mentors who tried to pull you in a different direction? And why didn't you stick with it?
It was my principal. I talk about him all the time, Kenneth Toole.
Yeah,
the first year I was allowed
like
back.
A big influence on you.
Kenneth Toole did, yeah. He was Frank K. Lane High School, because of all the crime and drugs. They closed off anybody be able to get into that school for about 4 or 5 years. I was the first year back in. And he wrote in my yearbook, actually, that principle, and I always remembered it. Do as you do in a baseball channel, you'll be a success in life. And even when I was in prisons, I would write letters to the principal, and I still was calling him Mr. Toole, and he told me, "John, at this age, back now I'm in my 40s. He goes, I think it's okay to call me Ken. I'm not your principal anymore." But he had a big influence. My baseball coach, Mike Diegas, I just ran into him last year. He was watching his grandson play baseball, and one of my friends' sons plays baseball. And I'm a big, baseball guy still. And I showed up. He calls me uncle, and he says, "Hey, Uncle John," and he tells me that a buddy of mine growing up, Vinny Galliano's son, was his coach. So I went to see him. I ran into some old friends, and my baseball coach was there. He had a big influence on me, and a great guy. Actually, he's still playing softball for a 50 and over league or something. I mean, the guy's incredible. Nice guy. But they just couldn't reach me. They tried.
How did money and status show up in your neighborhood? And what messages did that send to a young kid watching all of this going on? You come from a poor family. I mean, they middle low class, and you see all of these watts of money, the beautiful cars, the beautiful women, their jewelry. They're going out to discotheques. They get treated with a lot of respect, maybe out of fear or maybe because they're well liked. But they had a lot of, like you had Kisses Jerome's in Queens, the discotheques on Queens Boulevard.
Yeah.
Then you had a lot of big discotheques, Regine's, the Inferno, the Electric Warehouse. I mean, the Roseland, Ipanema, La Bamba, the Inferno. Because I used to dance at that time. I was one of the best dancers, the hustle dancers in New York.
Hey, I'm laughing because and smiling because you're bringing back such memories that those were great places. What happens is this: when you're on the street, right? I had a very laid back personality, and so people would like me because I was laid back. But also, the club owners or people that knew me started to realize from, I guess, people talking. They throw your name out, and then they start treating you different. So when you start getting treated by legitimate people and businesses, it's a different level. You start realizing, wow, I made it. You start bullshitting yourself that, wow, I made it. I'm successful, which you're really not. But you're trying to believe because financially you're getting better off that you made it, but you didn't make it really. You're still the same bum because you got there the wrong way. And when I started going to these places and they were having problems with different guys or gangs, these guys would ask me, John, do you know this guy? And you end up hurting them for them. You do favors for them, and then you even get treated even better. The problem is when I started seeing these things, just the same way when I started watching wise guys and street guys making big money and they're driving nice cars, I started doing the same thing. I started buying Lincolns and Caddies in those days, and I love Corvettes, and I started buying convertible Vets. And I'd see young kids that they would chase me with the car, from my neighborhood. I'd get out of the car and I'd throw them the keys. And they would sit in the car and then they'd ask me, they're 14, can I drive it? And I go, yeah, drive it. And they thought I was kidding. I said, no, drive the car. Because I remember guys, when I wanted to drive a car as a kid. And I'm thinking I'm being nice to them, but really I'm hurting them. I'm influencing them the wrong way because they're saying, wow, I want to be like this guy.
There was a very close relationship between you and John Gotti Jr. and the Gotti family. I mean, you even carry babies in their house. You guys had a very close-knit relationship. There was a bunch of young guys, upcoming guys, both Italian that will eventually become made guys, and also associates, which are non-Italians, but that also put out a lot of work in organized crime, and they are earners. They make money for whatever family they're working for. What was it like to be in the middle of the Gotti family at that time? It's before they hit on Castellano, before Mr. Gotti became the boss of the Gambino crime family. What was it like?
I mean, it was, we didn't get consequences yet. So you love the life because so far to that stage, there was no consequences, anybody going to jail yet. There was a couple of friends of mine from the street that were getting killed. But I started to realize I became the figure of the younger generation of wise guys, kids that would hang out with me almost for a schooling in the street. And then they start making them. And slowly each one of those guys got getting made, but they didn't have no reputation of doing anything besides being a nepotism of who their fathers were or who their uncles were, or they were Italian. And, they were kiss-ass guys, some of them earners. But I started realizing that I became unique, and I didn't know it as a kid. And meaning I was unique because I was the shooter. I was the violent guy. I was the guy that was being sent to go put in the work for these guys to have a reputation that they got because they weren't putting that work in. And anybody that looks back at our whole crew of guys, and you can go through the names, and there were dozens of us. None of these guys were putting in work. And, you could go through their records where most of them never even got locked up, or even after all these years. But they're not really about anything. They're kind of guys that get straightened out, they get dressed, they go out, and they put on a good act, but they're not actually getting down in that world. And, some of the guys in my neighborhood, we grew up like Ringo from the homicides, as a gangster. I know these guys, these guys are getting down. They're fighting, they're getting stabbed up, they're stabbing people. So I was raised legitimately from the street. These guys are somewhat faking their way through the street. So I started understanding the difference.
How did your friendship with John Gotti Jr. evolve from neighborhood kids, sports pals, to serious criminal partners?
I think because we had something, it's like a relationship with a guy and a girl. You have to have some connections, right, for it to be a good relationship. Me and him had something that was unique. His father was the boss, or becoming the boss. He had a big name and reputation, his dad. And I started having a big name and reputation of being a strong arm and violent for them. So us together was a dynamic duo, I guess. We had our differences over the years, but when I sit back and analyze it, I got no hard feelings with anybody, with him or anybody else anymore. But, you look back and you say, man, I wonder why everybody was afraid of us. You stepped the wrong way with him or somebody in his family, they knew I was coming. And if I was coming and another family tried to intervene, then the father stepped in. So we were pretty powerful at young ages, and we didn't realize the power, I don't think. Because, as kids, we're doing things, but we're also joking and playing around a lot. We're in nightclubs, we're vacationing, we're down in Florida. We used to fly back and forth in the old days, if you remember. You get on a plane at any hour, 11, 12 o'clock, have dinner in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. And the next morning, we're with a couple of girls. The next morning we come home, we have breakfast. It's not like, we had to spend weeks there. So we used to hit back and forth, fly back and forth. And we're in California. We were all over the place as young guys with entourage of women and guys and unlimited money, obviously.
At one time, you were close to Willie Boy Johnson. When Willie Boy Johnson was ousted, because he was ousted in federal court in front of John Gotti by a prosecutor, and it became known that he was an informant, and then he got killed a couple of days after. How did that whole situation of mistrust within the family? Because this was a guy that was really close, grew up with John Gotti. I'm talking about they did a lot of things together.
He was one of the toughest guys, and I heard it from Fat Andy Ruggiano, who was the boss before Gotti, because he shot Willie Boy in the head. And Willie Boy used to tell me, look at my head, the back. He used to show me, he goes, feel that, because the bullet was still in his head. And he tells me, Fat Andy shot me. He goes, he was a tough son of a bitch. And he says, but I had a harder head than his bullet. He used to joke. And, we had a sports business on Avenue U in Brooklyn, right by King's Plaza. And John, the father, sent me down there to see him because Willie Boy was John's partner in the sports business. And at the time, I had the New York Mets gambling with me. So Willie put me on a half sheet because obviously I didn't have that kind of money to handle. They would bet $200,000 a week, $100,000, $300,000. There was a guy, Ali Lizard, that was friends with Gotti Sr. He gave me him also as a customer. And so I'd go on a half sheet with those guys. But I couldn't handle that action. There were some weeks, and I'm going back now, 86 when we had the Mets. So 1986, if 300,000 was won, how was I going to pay that? I'm making big money, but not to that level yet. So especially in a week, you can't pay that kind of money. They would pay off the debts for me. And then, we'd split the winnings.
When the incident happened of the young guys at the pizzeria, that they chased the black young man, and he was fearful and he went into the Bell Parkway and got killed. What was the feeling in the neighborhood with the Gambino crime family? Did they talk to the young kids and say, look, you can't bring this heat up on the neighborhood? Was there any
Listen,
consequence from that?
you know what the problem is? Because I have mixed friends, black, Spanish, till today. It didn't matter if those kids were white; they were going to get chased. You don't go in our neighborhood. They were carrying fake guns. They were walking through a neighborhood. They were looking to steal cars, and they got chased. And one of the kids that chased them was a kid, Lester. Lester was from London originally. His girlfriend was black. It wasn't race. It wasn't a race-bound thing. And the media, and I can't stand the media because they still do it with the race bait and trying to the division, and it's nonsense. It's a propaganda thing. I knew some of the kids. My other friend's son was involved in it. Frankie Perone, his little brother, I think, was one of the kids that was involved. And there was another incident in Brooklyn years later. But the kid Lester wasn't a racist.
Incident in Brooklyn.
Huh?
Joey Farmer.
Joey Farmer, right? Yeah. Danny Farmer's, yeah. Yeah. So, I'm not familiar with the incident in Brooklyn, to be honest with you. I just remember it. But I know personally because I know the kids from Howard Beach. Now, if they were white, if they were Spanish, if they were Indian, the same thing would have happened. It was a neighborhood thing. When you walk through the neighborhood looking for trouble, especially back in those days, you're going to find it. And when they found it, and then later on, you got Al Sharpton, who I'm not a big advocate of. I think he's what they said, like, what's those birds, those crows, that, he feasts on pain. He feasts on the pain of the black family. He feasts on the pain of the white family, and he tries to get himself a dollar bill, and he causes that animosity. So it's not true caring for anybody. And so I was never a big fan of Sharpton anyway. But, those incidents, when they happen, and those kids, I hate, because Lester's dead now. He died, the young kid. But Lester had a black girlfriend. I mean, and the thing, to die being known as a guy that hated blacks, it's not true. It's just a young kid, like all of us. I got beat by kids of all colors. And they didn't beat me because, they beat me for reasons, whatever they beat me for at the time. We're all over the street, all of us. We're making moves, we're doing dumb shit, and you're going to get jumped. It's part of the life. But they didn't beat me because I was white or Albanian. They beat me for financial reasons, or I was in somebody's business somewhere, or they thought I was.
Who was in charge of your crew? Who did you report it to in the Gambino crime family at the time?
I was with John Gotti. The father would say I'm with the regime, meaning I'm with the Gotti family themselves.
You were with the Capo regime then?
Yeah. And as far as our crew on the street, I ran the street. I was the boss of all the guys on the street. They answered to me. It was testimony during the trials about, how the father said when the son got straightened out, everybody comes to the club Wednesday night, everybody's got to report to me. So, although I wasn't a made guy, that, people reported to me.
How did the perception of the Gotti family on the street differ from what you saw behind closed doors? Because they were a very close-knit family. I mean, a loving family. They had, children, grandchildren. They lost a son that got killed by a neighbor's car. What was the feel like in the house? One thing is he's the boss in the street. How do you see it when you were hanging out with his son?
Like any other household, you're sleeping in the house, you see the real side of people, right? So, I'd wake up in the house and the father would be yelling about something, and he'd see me on the couch and he goes, "I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about whoever he's talking about." He wouldn't miss a beat. But, listen, all families look great on the outside, and we're all dysfunctional in different ways. They were a normal family that arguing and talking regular and, talking to the father the same way. And, listen, I always hear the same thing about John, about how he was such a killer and a tough guy. But there was such a soft side to John that no one knows. And John had a good personality. He'd laugh a lot, joke a lot. He had a lot of, obviously he had a lot of stress on his shoulders between, I lost a daughter, so I know what it was when he lost a son, Frankie, when little Frankie died. And it's devastating. You don't wish that on enemies or anybody. It's just devastating for your life. That destroyed him also. And, he tried not to show it, but obviously he chose. The family was, distraught over it. the father doubted, he doted on his daughter Vicky. He doted on little Frankie. I mean, everybody has that little like kind of favorites, and even though as a parent you shouldn't, you love all your kids, but there's something special, like a gleam in their eye when it came to them. The father, just he loved the kids. I mean, he was, there's no words for it. People talk to me about my daughter. There's nothing to say. You're never going to smile the same. You're never going to laugh the same. You're never going to enjoy life the same. You're going to go through the motions. It's going to look like it's not bothering you, but until the day the dirt's on your head, it's you're going to live through pain. There's no other way around that.
Losing your daughter to this terrible plague, which is fentanyl. How does it change your perspective from the time when you were running the street and you saw people in the life peddling heroin or peddling coke, and at that time fentanyl wasn't added to these drugs, but it still killed a lot of people.
Well, I'm a realist, right? So I get a lot of people that write me bullshit, because I'm in the media. I just can't stand cowards. I mean, you're allowed to have your opinion. You can say to me, "A lady on the news told me," and she didn't mean it. She just said it straight, and I respect that. She goes, "You sold drugs, and you hurt a lot of people with drugs." And I said to her, "I'm not proud of what I did. I can't go back to that. I didn't think about it at the time I was doing it. I mean, I'm ashamed of that I was doing it. And this is not a cop-out. When me and you go get a drink, we ask for alcohol. We don't ask for arsenic. When I was selling drugs, you asked me for cocaine, I gave you that. If you asked for an upper or a mescaline or any other pill, a Percocet, I gave you that. I didn't give you poison. There's a difference in what's going on, which is murder. When you give somebody arsenic, when you give somebody fentanyl, they didn't ask for fentanyl. They asked for whatever. Back in the old days, we'd ask for a nickel or a dime bag of wheat. When you spray it with fentanyl, I didn't ask you to spray it with fentanyl, which is deadly. I didn't ask you to give, my daughter didn't ask for a Percocet. She wasn't out all night partying with people you hear, "Oh, you died from fentanyl." No, she was sleeping. She got up at 9:30 in the morning waiting for the baby. She took a Percocet to lay down and relax because she couldn't sleep well. And she, obviously you shouldn't be taking Percocets, and she did. But she wasn't drawing 10 grams of coke and snorting all night, drinking, pushing it down with vodka, and then eating pills and blow up your heart. That's, when somebody ODs or everybody bangs a bag of dope and it's bad and you OD. This is just one pill. So many regular kids are taking fat burning pills and dying. They're taking a Percocet, they're dying. They're smoking weed, they're dying. I mean, that's murder. There's a big difference. And again, I'm not justifying what I did, but I gave somebody what they wanted. And if they wanted it and they killed themselves with it, that's one thing. But giving them something they didn't ask for and killing them is a completely different thing. So I'm a big advocate of these ships that the president's blowing up. I wish I was the guy dropping the bomb on them, because if you're going to let them go, whatever it's 10 people, 100 people on that boat, doesn't matter how many, and you let that fentanyl in America, you're going to kill over 100,000 people, 200,000 people, 50,000 people, innocent kids, and innocent adults. I've been involved with Black Poster Project where, when I go to these events, there's posters of whole families that died the same night at a party. Mothers, kids. I mean, it's incredible that if it wasn't for President Trump, this still be going on, because he's got these numbers down to almost zil, to nothing. There's a guy, Frank, which Tarantino, a great guy. He's involved.
Amazing job with the DA in New York, and the work that the men and women of the DEA and the other federal agents are doing to try to fight this evil is amazing, and I give them a lot of credit, and I hope God continues to bless them and their families, because there has to be consequences to what's going on, especially the governments like Colombia, Venezuela. They're pushing this poison into the United States, and people are believing that they are sniffing coke or that they are doing some type of drug, and they finding that they are actually buying poison.
Yeah. You got, listen, you got the president of, and you know this, of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, right? He was a guerrilla at one time. I used to live in Barranquilla, so I know he was, at one time. These guys are pumping out, there's factories of drugs there that, at one time Colombia got straightened out, and when I was there, they were killing politicians left and right. Now you have our country of politicians that are, complacent and complicit of what's going on with the drugs here and the motion. When President Trump came in, we voted him in. And I'm hoping, because of my past history of what I was, 20 years ago and back, I'm a different human being. I'm so pro ICE. I'm so pro DEA. I'm so pro FBI, police. And I watched, just recently, there was an ICE officer that was trying to be run down by a woman, and he killed her. Justifiably so. She deserved to get killed. You're trying to take that man's life. Yeah, and this is not a free for all on our ICE officers or on our police officers. They need consequences, and those consequences got to be that where you attack them, you get hurt, you get killed, you go to jail for a long time. And anybody that says anything different, then you're okay with the breakdown of America, and our freedoms are gone, and this country is going to be gone. So I look at things for my sons and my grandkids at this point.
You were known as a top enforcer and a hitter. What did the professionalism mean in the role and the street level?
What did it mean? What on the street level?
The professionalism of what you were doing meant in the role and the street.
When people saw me, they knew they used to say, this guy's got double personality. Because if you're not doing anything wrong, I was very polite. I'd go to restaurants, I'd pay my bill, I was extra polite, I was always trying to be a gentleman. I didn't want to be like this bully guy coming in. I knew most people after years of me being on the street, I had a big reputation that I would walk in, and I wasn't that guy that came with 5 and 10 guys. I would come by myself or maybe one guy with me and, do what I was doing. And I was doing what I was doing, and I took it serious like any other job. You do it with, pride and integrity is crazy words to say when you're doing things what I was doing, but that's how I looked at it. And I also looked at it as trying to be fair to people that deserve to get hurt or people that didn't. I was known for killing several guys that gang raped a girl. I was known for, exercising a lot of violence if you hurt somebody's family or their kids, or they walked into somebody's business and they try to shake it down and hurt them. So I had different set of morals for myself that I try to push on the street. It's very hard to do because the street doesn't respect kindness. And somebody said, another street guy said, the street doesn't love you back. It just doesn't. You're only going to find misery on the street. That's why I'm always pushing this agenda to the young generation. Have confidence in yourself, because you're going to bullshit yourself if you think there's a happy ending for being on the street. There is no happy ending. You're not going to enjoy that money. You're going to lose your life possibly. You're going to be killing people if you're really getting down serious. You're going to lose family members. You're going to lose your girlfriend. You ain't going to have family, any kind of family life worth of anything if you're going to be on the street. And you're going to get hurt like me. You're going to get shot up like I did. You're going to get stabbed up like I did several times. You're going to get batted. And, that's never going to go away. Everywhere you go, you still got to be vigilant, because there's a lot of enemies out there for all the years of I did things. So.
When you were running drugs and bookmaking operations in the street, what metric or numbers mattered most to you week by week?
I think the numbers that mattered most to me was, first off, I had probably 100 or so guys directly or indirectly working drugs for me. I had sports business, I had a loan shark business, and my bottom line is I wanted to live not just okay. I wanted to do what I did. I bought properties all over the place. I bought an estate that's probably worth $10 million now that I lost, 15-acre estate. I had a beautiful place by the World Trade Center. So my barometer was to get myself to a level to be probably, when I think back, I wanted to be that guy that was not a millionaire. I wanted to have a couple $100 million. I wanted to be to the level where I said I'm successful in my family for the rest of the history of our family lineage. But, I was actually pretty close, I would say. I owned a ton of business. Parking company was up at $17 million. I lost it all. Nightclub, $4 million a year for 10 years. And some houses, about 16, I name them by address for the people that are telling me, or they can't believe what I owned, or they question, I'm going to show you something. They question this, Willie. And you know me personally. These are by names. These are people that there's about 70 names here that I stabbed a baseball bat and stabbed up. So when they say he's exaggerating numbers over the years, I don't say it because I'm bragging about it. I'm disgusted about it. But I say it because I'm trying to tell kids, I am the guy to listen to. I'm telling you, that ain't the life. I'm not that fraud guy that didn't put in that work. And, I've been to 40-something countries. I ran all over the world. And as you know, I spent 3 years in one of the worst penitentiaries in probably any country in Brazil. So I'm telling kids, please listen to me.
You were there with Comando Vermelho and Comando Capital.
Yeah, and a lot of those bosses were friends of mine, and we had riots in those jails. I got my teeth all knocked out I took a shotgun off of one of the cops. And when I gave it back to him eventually, he butted me with it and took out about 8 or 9 teeth in the front of my mouth, split my lip open. I ended up in the hospital. I wouldn't go to the hospital for weeks because I didn't trust them. I thought if they took me out, they'd try to shoot me and say I tried to escape. So I had to get Otavio Neves was one of my attorneys, pretty famous attorney. I had to get a team of security guys to follow our cause, paid them to make sure that they don't plan saying I escaped. And they shot me out on the street because, those jails are that dangerous. One of the guards, one of the wardens was killed by the other warden because of money. So for the people that don't know how those countries work, everything's based off of cantinas and payoffs and different things. So
how do you manage the discipline of the guys under you who are using gambling, otherwise becoming liabilities to your crew?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
How do you manage the discipline among the guys under you who are using gambling, drugs, and other things and were becoming liabilities to your crew?
Honestly, I was too easy going on the guys that were friends of mine. A lot of those guys in that world, and I'm not saying in this world, in that world deserve to be killed for some of the things they did when they double-crossed me. One of my cousins double-crossed me at the time when I had a falling out with Gotti, and I shot him up 4 times. He lost his leg after he was warned that he stays loyal to me, not to the Gotti family. He works for me. But guys learn the hard way. I had another guy, Mondo, who I told him I had orders from Gotti, the father. There better not be trouble in any more clubs. At the time, there was things going on with our family. And he warned me, and one of the guys stabbed the guy in a nightclub. When he got in the car with us, he was in the back seat. I usually sat in the front when somebody was driving, but I sat in the back purposely with him and another guy. And I told the guy who was driving, it was a little snow out that day, we're on Hempstead Turnpike. I said, did I tell you not to do anything? Did I get orders from John to make sure that you guys do not get in anything right now? Now, John's not going to explain to me what's going on, but obviously something's going on that he didn't want no headaches or problems. So I told the guy, either you have a choice here. Either I shoot you and throw you out of the car, or you jump and get the fuck out. And he was hesitating. I says to the guy driving, speed up, pick up another 5 miles. And he was going about 50. I said, now he's going 55. I said, the longer you take, that car's going to be going faster. If you don't go out, I'm going to shoot you and throw you out. Eventually, he jumped out, and he broke his nose. I broke his arm. and he lived, obviously. But there's consequences like that when guys aren't listening to orders, and they get a lot worse than that. I was a little kinder than some people would have been, to be honest with you, because you're talking about life and death every day, and if you're not following the rules, I'm no different than everybody else. You can go. I mean, John obviously had a special spot in his heart for me, because after all the shooting and batting and things I did outside of the family, he would have butchered me if he didn't like me or sincerely care about me. Because when you get a warning once or twice or three times and you continue, you're gonna go. There's gonna be an order, and you're gonna walk in, and they're gonna take you, and you're done. So obviously there was a special relationship when people question it and say, well, then you explain to me why I got away with what I got away with if there wasn't.
To what extent do you actively cultivate relationship with corrupt officials, police officers that were on the take, and public servants?
I had probably, I named them at the time after everything got jammed up. I had about 30 cops that worked for me, selling drugs, moving drugs, picking up money for me, bookmaking for me. Phil Baroni, the ex-detective, was killing with me. He recruited detectives that were friends of his. One was working for and the driver of Morgenthau, who was the district attorney in New York at the time. He was his driver, so he would give me information of conversations while Morgenthau was in a car with other people, or he was making phone calls. So I started working guys through the detective Phil. Some of them are police officers that were, before they became cops, they were working for me selling drugs. Some of them I put them in to apply to be police officers so I can have them in my pocket. So there was a load of them that were running around with me. They carried drugs for me, delivered drugs for me, in uniform, out of uniform.
When you had a proffer at one time, because you had several indictments, one out of Florida, one out of New York, and then you had another one in Jersey, or if I'm not mistaken, am I correct?
Yeah, correct.
How many times do you had to proffer, to be able to get the letter, of cooperation? Those proffers, you get queen for a day. You can say whatever you want as long as you don't lie.
Yeah. When I was in, I caught a case out of Jersey. I refused to talk. They wanted to bring me in at a proffer session. I refused. They locked me up. They put me in the hole. They put me in the street. They brought me in Queens. And they didn't indict me yet. They put me on a grand jury. I started answering some questions about my name, and then they started asking me some questions. I answered one or two, and then I shut up. And they told me we can actually lock you up for 18 months. And I'm like, well, I'm not talking. They said, you're not a target right now, but we want you to talk and proffer. I refused again. I came back on another case, and I took a blame. I took the hit for everybody else. So I proffered against myself, and I went to jail on a bribery case only. And I was trying to protect a friend of mine's wife, who she never went to jail. So I took the blame.
Did you have to allocate to all of the homicides and all of the beatings and all of that?
Well, when I was in Brazil and I was on the run, obviously I'm not cooperating because I went on the run, or I wouldn't have went on the run. I spent a couple million between attorneys, investigators, and when I was sitting in those Brazilian penitentiaries, the whole Bonanno family, and people could look at time frames. I was in jail from 2004 to 7 in Brazil. I came back right before 2007, the end of December. The whole Bonanno family, the boss was wearing a wire. The underboss, Sal Vitale, was cooperating. The consigliere, Sesso, started cooperating, and 12 of their captains. And in my family, the Gambino family, all the bosses, captains, and everybody were accused of trying to cut deals and proffering with the FBI. So when I came back from Brazil after spending 3 years in those pens, about 68 guys were testifying against me on grand juries and giving testimony or CIs against me. I actually just did a podcast about one of the captains, and I read testimony at my trial that him, Ronnie One Arm, his son, also a captain, was accused of giving information. At the time, they beat him up after his plea agreement, beat him up in jail, came home, beat him up again. And just most recently, these guys are hanging around again, I understand. But my other co-defendants were one of the guys, the accused shooter of Paul Castellano, his son, adopted son, testified after he lost my trial in Florida. They were all my co-defendants. Terry Scaglione, another guy whose grandfather was a wise guy, made guy. His father was best friends with Roy DeMeo, Steve Catalano. Every one of them went to trial, blue trial. During the trial, if anybody wants the court minutes, it's in Middle District of Florida in 2006 while I'm in a penitentiary in Brazil. They blamed all the murders on me, shootings on me, robberies on me. And after they blew trial, they all became informants. Terry Scaglione prior to that was a CI since 1993 to 1996. And his family were Cigar City Mafia with Santos Traficante. So for the people, I have a big history with all these guys. But, you know, the mob, they never caught me, Willie, and I think you know that. The only reason why I went to prison is they were all giving me up.
Right, somebody gave you up, yes.
All of them, 68 of them, never caught with a tape or a video or a gun or a bullet or a drug or paraphernalia. Zero. Not even bookmaking.
There was a case where a bunch of names came out with street nicknames, and John Gotti said, "Who the hell are these people? Never met them."
Yeah.
You saw that, right?
You know, the funny thing is, people ask me, I have a friend of mine, a black guy, we're great friends since we're kids. Gangster, tough guy. He was from Linden Boulevard, and his name's TT. And people ask me, what's his real name? I said, fuck do I know? I never asked him. Nigga, you're friends your whole life? No interest. You know, we didn't do that. We didn't question each other. We didn't ask. There wasn't like, a lot of pictures back in those days. Nobody had cameras. I mean, I happened to be caught on a lot of, which Ravenite films. I'm on, the Bergen films. I'm coming in at Gotti's house on films. I'm at the wedding.
I got a couple of those films. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's in the era where there's no films. I was picking up Gotti from the father from court in the city, and they in the NYPD attacked the car looking for a gun that I had on me. I believe the driver at that time was an informant. I could be wrong, but I think my whole life I always believed he was the informant. But who knows? That's the treachery of that life.
Gave you up the most?
Say that again?
Who really hurted you when they gave you up? Who do you believe or who do you blame for your demise at the end of your criminal career?
I blame the whole mafia. That's why I talk against it. Because, you got guys, even till today, that talk nonsense, but they never put in, listen, I say it all the time because I'm not advocating murder, but that's what we did for a living. So when I was sitting in a penitentiary in Brazil and there was people one after another being accused of being informants and rats, their job was supposed to be to kill these guys, to silence them one way or another. They didn't do that. They still haven't done that. Now, it's not a surprise to anybody, the whole mob, and I just said the whole Colombo family ratted in the early 90s after the war. The whole Bonanno family ratted in 2004 and 5 while I was in those penitentiaries. 3/4 of the Gambino family hierarchy was ratting in 2005 and 6 when I was in prison. And a little before that, some of the guys. You have Sammy Gravano that ratted. You had the Lucchese family, Al Diarco, the boss ratting, Gaspipe, the underboss ratting. So my question to everybody is, why, if you want to be the mafia, have any of you not done anything to any of these guys? Yet you'll hear them talking about me all the time, but they don't tell the story what I just said. Not story, timeline. When I was away, 2004 to 7, what were these families doing besides telling on me? And I'm a big advocate to talk against the mob, and not because I want retribution against it, just to tell kids, look, I'm a prime example. Look what they did. They destroyed me by their testimony, and they flipped it around as if I did something. But, I answered them when they gave me up. That was, pretty simple.
John, how come they called you the calculator?
I was, very astute when it came to money. I didn't write anything down on papers because I was always worried about my dog getting kicked in. So I had it all in my head. And I was running several legitimate businesses. I was running a drug business. I was running sports business. I knew names. I knew play. I still do. I can name names, places, dates. That list I just showed you, about 70 names on these papers. I can hand it to you, not read it. You can ask me about any of them. I'll give you who was there, witnesses, what went on. I got a good memory. So the government started calling me the calculator.
How did you structure profit sharing and overhead in your crews to keep people motivated but under control?
I made a big mistake with that because you have guys like, most guys just give them like $750. You can make more money driving a taxi. They give them money where they needed them to need them. Me, I made all of my partners. I put a guy in the parking business, Terry Scaglione, and he was dead broke. I made him my 50% partner. He caused me that RICO case because the government, as much as I did a lot of shooting and killing, they couldn't get me in a time frame for the RICO, but they got me through extortion. Terry Scaglione extorted my own workers that I had working for me, partners of mine, because they were stealing. Meanwhile, when Terry took over the business, when I went to jail, I told him to cut me in on the business. And he told me to go fuck myself. And his business is probably worth about 10, 15, 20 million today, which was mine. So,
were there any legitimate investments you regret not making when you had the capital and connections to do it? I know that you guys were big in Wall Street, and you had a lot of contacts that could triple your money if you invested the right way. Was there
my cousin bought First Jersey Securities from John Brennan. Later on, he gets locked up. I passed the Series 7 test. I actually took that test and passed that test when I was about 20 years old. So I understood the stock market, but I didn't need to buy stock. I needed to buy property in Jersey City, which I never did. I should have bought all the property in Woodhaven. I own my house in Woodhaven. I bought from my parents after my grandfather died. I bought it for, I think, 225, something like that, thousand. And the house is worth probably 1.2. All I had to do was buy up the property right where I lived. And I should have bought 10, 15, 20 houses, and I'd be worth about 30 million just from those houses today.
Tell me about what was going on in Sparks. It was Sparks right underneath the 59th Street Bridge. They had the
Vertical Club. Vertical Club. My friend Tommy was the general manager. Actually, I hooked him up with a girl. He married her. She was a singer. Later on, she divorced him, and she married the famous investigator, Bo Dietl. And I know Margot for a long time. Nice girl, and Bo ended up marrying her. But
what was going on in that club?
Scores.
Scores. That's the name.
Yes.
There were a couple of fights, shootings. There were all types of things going on in there.
Yeah, a couple of Albanian guys had a problem with one of the bouncers. Actually, it started over nonsense, over the Yankees and the hat, and they
Those
were
guys
drinking
came
a little.
from the Bronx, if I believe.
Yes.
My memory serves me right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I wasn't there that night. If I was there, I could have stopped that shooting. I was very good friends with Michael Blutrick, Jewish attorney that got jammed up in an insurance scam case. He was actually Andrew Cuomo, the governor's law partner, and he knew Mario pretty well too. But Mario would be down the hallway in another office, not attached to him. Another lawyer, Herman, was a CNN analyst, was part of that conspiracy of whatever they were doing, whatever the criminal enterprise was. But Andrew skated away from that somehow, obviously because of connections politically. And those guys did some serious time, and a rabbi went to jail for life. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but I'll remember his name. Shamil, but the rabbi did a life sentence. Blutrick did about 15 or 16 years. Herman had cancer, the CNN analyst, and he never went to prison. He got away with it because of that, and I don't know what else his case, what they had on him criminally.
One of the things that doesn't come up that much is the connection between the families and the Colombian cartels, both the Cali and the Medellin cartel, to be the suppliers of cocaine at that time, because it was an unwritten law in the mob that Mr. Carlo didn't want anybody dealing any of that. And
but we all dealt drugs. When I went on the run, and I was over 20 countries, I went to Colombia, and cartel guys, friends of mine, helped me move around, brought me to a Venezuelan army base, and I lived with if I would have just stayed there, I would have been fine. I was there when Chavez was, running the country.
President, right.
So there was no relationship with the United States. I should have stayed there. I was in Cuba. On hindsight, obviously my life's in a better place now, although I did, suffer during the time and running. And, people say I only did a couple of years, but I did a little over 10 years on this last case. Before that, I did probably another 7 or so. So about, 17, 18 years in total, besides the house arrest and the short bids here and there. But I would say, I had big connections to I was friends with the Flores brothers from Mexico that testified against El Chapo. I was friends with Nelson Canaderi, whose father was the founder of MS-13. I'm still friends with Nelson, actually. The Flores brothers I haven't seen since prison. The cartel I had in Colombia made me go there, and they helped move me around. So I understand that, I did business with the cartel since I'm a kid. By accident, a father was killed by the cartel. Their son Henry took over the business, and his sister Lorena was my girl. So, just coincidentally, I started dating her, and I stepped in. I realized that something was going on with the family, and I started doing business with the cartel through Henry. So we had some serious hooks with drug business, obviously. And I kept relations around the world with those guys in those cartels. That's why I understand. I understand when the naive people are talking about open borders, and they're talking about what people being muled in and out of the country, and weapons and drugs, how we get it in and out, and the corruption about who's working where, and guys like Garcia that was head of the FBI in Mexico. It's, to me, these are obvious things. Somebody high ranking is corrupt, which I called that prior to Garcia and even getting locked up. I knew they had too much intel the way things were coming through, because we would bring all kinds of truckloads of drugs, and we had, obviously we're paying who, when it comes through, what time it comes through, and what route it's coming through.
There's also a lot of secrecy regarding the gumas within the crews. You guys have your wives and your ladies waiting for you at home, but most of the time you out partying all night with your gumas. Back when I first got married, I had that estate. So, you pull in my driveway with 7 blocks. I had a beautiful built-in pool. It was on a lake. All my house was mirrors around, windows around. I had an outdoor boxing ring. I had a pavilion, had baseball cages, half-court basketball court. And at 2 a.m, I'd wake up, 3 o'clock in the morning, I had 12 dogs. And I'd wake up and I'd tell my ex-wife at the time, my wife, I got to go. I got an appointment at 5 a.m. She's thinking, all right, where's he going? He's got an appointment at 5 a.m. I drive down to Atlantic City because I was only about an hour from there. And the clubs would be open till 10 a.m. So they just started popping at 3, 4 a.m. And I go meet my girlfriend down there, and I take her. And then from there, we run around all day, go to the beach. So, everything we did was an angle, even our relationships. There are no-show jobs in the different unions that the Gambino had their hands on, whether it was construction, whether it was the cement, the concrete, or the iron. How many guys were on these no-show jobs and getting big money for work that they weren't performing?
There was a ton of guys. There's a guy, Tony Genovese, he passed away. Great guy. He was a Paul Castellano guy. And I'll show you the weakness of the mob, right? Because you can't build those superstructures without guys like Tony Genovese, right? And, you got to pour concrete. So you weren't pouring anything in the 80s without the permission of the mafia. And nothing gets done without the concrete being poured. In other words, even though you got the Teamsters, nothing gets delivered to those sites without the Teamsters. But the concrete starts it all, because without being able to pour, there is no job. And then once that pouring goes, then it's the Teamsters. Nothing gets moved to those jobs without the Teamsters. Now, the mob got so weak, because years ago, you couldn't just open up a concrete company and say, okay, I'm pouring in New York. If you poured, you're going to be underneath that cement. You weren't doing it. You were getting hurt. You were going to be warned, closed down. You're not opening shit. And there was only 3 guys at the time, I believe, that was really pouring anything major. And now you got 100 companies. You got Indians, you got Russians, you got Irish, you got everybody pouring. So they'll tell you the state of the mafia from back then till today.
If the young men still in that life are listening to you today, this interview, in secret, what is the one sentence you want echoing in their heads tomorrow morning when they wake up?
I hope you like jail. Because every day they go to bed, if they really believe they're not going to jail for a long time, if you're doing anything on the street, you're delusional. You're going to jail, and I'll explain it to the people. Listen, you're going to jail because bosses like Joe Messina wear a wire. You're going to jail because they straighten out guys. They make guys, so people don't know what straighten out means. They make guys in their underwear now because they're wearing wires at these ceremonies. And if they're going to make guys in their underwear because they don't trust them, then why are you making them? So and back in my day, they didn't lock up the bosses because the RICO just started at that time. Now they are charging people with RICO so they can get to the bosses very easily. And the bosses are the ones that are ratting on the underlings. Years ago, it was the underlings trying to rat on the bosses. Now the exposure's the other way. And I'm not, the thing is, when people curse and yell and call people rats, I keep saying over and over again, the whole Colombo family ratted. Go on Google and look. In the early 90s, after the war, they all ratted. Go on Google and look in 2004 and 5 and 6. If the whole Bonanno family, and I mean the whole family, the boss down to the captains, 14 of them that ran the structure of the Bonanno family, all ratted. Anybody that didn't go to jail means they never did a fucking thing. I don't know if I can curse in here. They never did a thing. Because if they did, with the top bosses ratting, you'd all be in prison. So now you got the Gambino family, you have Sammy Gravano and every rest of them all ratting, captains and everybody else's and bosses. So you look into Philadelphia and you got Ralph Natale and Leonetti, boss, underboss, ratting on everybody. You have Chicago, you had the bosses of Calabrese's son and other guys. And I'm not talking against these guys. I don't know what happened, why they wanted to cooperate. So maybe they were justified for whatever they did. They got screwed over. Whatever the case is. I'm just stating the fact that Chucky Porter in Pittsburgh, the boss was ratting. Whitey Bulger in Boston, he's ratting. The Patriotic family had Bobby Louise, the boss, he ratted. What's there to say? They're all ratting. And I'm talking about the bosses. Al Diarco, Lucchese family, Gas Pipe, Lucchese family. The Chin Gigante's grandson and his son-in-law were ratting. This ain't a surprise. And for the gangsters that claim they're gangsters, you can't be too much of gangsters because you didn't kill any of these guys. So, they're not hard to find. Sammy Guarano's in Arizona. Everybody knows where he is. There's flights there every day and night. You don't even got to fly. How about taking a bus? If you wanted to kill a guy or you want to be gangsters of the 70s, 80s, 90s, you got to be a shooter. They're not capable. They don't want to go to jail for it. And that's fine. I'm just saying the life has changed because of what I just said. And I'm not talking about guys that are associates that are ratting and the guys that are just regular made guys that are ratting. I'm telling everybody, these are the bosses. What's there to know? What's there to say? Where is the loyalty? Where is, they're all full of shit until it's time for that button. And you know how many of these guys, and Willie, because you're in this industry, how many guys are CIs that are bosses, captains that are bosses, that are giving up things day and night, and they're just surviving because they're CIs? It's you got guys like Joe Watts that they had paperwork on him since in Staten Island since the meeting with Paul Castellano. And in the paperwork, it says the German. Now, he was accused of it. They accepted him right back in the mix. How is that? This guy's in his 80s now. He walked away, body after body, conspiracy after conspiracy. No real major time. And his best friend's Danny Marino over the years. Danny Marino's cellmate was Charlie Ray. Charlie Ray, for the people that don't know, came to prison where I was. I was told to take care of him from a note from Danny Marino. I called up to verify it through his family. Take care of the guy. The guy set up the whole prison in Allenwood. Anybody with a vowel at the end of the name went to the hole. They tried to give me a life sentence. They were trying to do a dump through Kentucky. And the guy, Charlie Ray, brought in an agent to say she was his wife, set up the whole jail, tried to set me up in a political scheme. And his mother, his stepmother, is the one that tipped me about it. But the point is, if you're ratting everybody out, you live with Danny Marino. Why was it that you didn't give him up? You gave everybody else up. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't cut the smell test. And if Joe Watson's your best friend, and he's an informant, so I got to give John Gotti Jr. credit. He wrote in his book that these guys were informants and rats. And, Junior is no dummy. And so I'll also give him that. He's not a dumb guy. So did he accuse him and have no evidence? I don't know. There's a lot of paperwork on Joe Watts. I was with the Gambino in prison. I was with Jeannie Gotti in prison. We all ate together every day. Jeannie Gotti was my cellmate in McKeon. So they had the paperwork on Joe Watts. Why is it all of a sudden they believe him when they had paperwork? I have another guy, Frankie, whose brother is Mikey Scar's brother-in-law, who's a captain. Also, these guys all have paperwork on Joe Watts. So my belief is stay away from all of them. The young guys, it's too complicated a life for you not to understand. And for you to understand, because I had an education since I'm 3 years old on these guys in that world. And it's just not a good world in any which way. You're going to end up dead. You're going to end up in jail. You're going to end up shot up, beat up, stabbed up, betrayed. And the mafia is not the mafia of TV land. It's just not.
Thank you, John. Listen, I hope that we have come to a conclusion for this program today. We ran out of time. I hope that we could do a second part to this, because it left me with a lot of questions that I did not ask.
Well, I got to say one thing before we go. I did a movie called Pony that's coming out pretty soon. It's about race car driving, and the message is about fentanyl. And I had a big part in that movie.
And also, tell me about your books, please, for the people to get the books that.
I did a book called Gotti's Rules, was a bestseller. Darkest Hour was a bestseller. Prison Rules is How to Survive in Prisons. It was a handbook. And another book called The Darkest Hour.
And right now you're a councilman for what town?
I'm a president of councilman in Englishtown, New Jersey.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure having you, and I hope that you will take my invitation to come back, because I have a lot of good questions to ask you. But
I'll definitely want to come back. But I have to say, God bless Iranian people for your freedom. God bless Venezuela and your freedom. God bless our president and all our first responders, ICE, and positive life with God and family and America, really. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Stay tuned, John.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you. This concludes this episode of Equalizer. A sincere thank you to our guest, Mr. John Alite, for his time, his candor, and for sharing his hard-earned insights from the inside the world of organized crime and from his path out of it. To everyone watching and listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please give it a like, share with your family and friends, and follow the Equalizer through the links below so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Your engagement helps keep this in-depth, nonsense conversation going and amplifies information that truly matters to public safety and security. And finally, a special thanks to our production team, for their constant support and professionalism. Without their work behind the scene, this program will not be possible. Thank you to all, and God bless you. Till the next time, this is William Acosta for the Equalizer podcast.